Kickoff call. My name is Anup Dawar. I'm the Vice President of Product Management here at GitLab. And today we'll kick off release 13.3, slated for August 22nd, 2020. As always, we welcome everyone to contribute. And if you would like to do that, you can go to about.gitlab.com/directions/kickoff page, where you will find videos and issues all laid out for you to contribute. Keep in mind that we do plan ambitiously, which means some of the things we talk about here today may not ship in 13.3, although we do intend to ship them. The sequence today is that we'll start off with ops led by Kenny, and then we'll hand it over to David for secure and defend. Next comes enablement with Josh, and finally dev with Eric. With that, take it away, Kenny.
Awesome. Thanks, Anup. Let me share my screen. Here we go. As Anup said, my name is Kenny Johnston. I cover the ops section, and just to overview, the ops section includes the verify, package, release, configure, and monitor stages here at GitLab. I'm going to highlight one kind of key theme across a number of stages, but first I wanted to highlight the feature I'm most excited about. It is coming in the verify stage as part of our testing group, and they're going to be working on adding group-based code coverage test results display right within GitLab. As you may have known, in recent releases, we've shipped the ability to see the code coverage test report that shows the history of how your code coverage is improving or not improving for a specific project. Starting in 13.3, we're going to add the ability to do the same at a group-wide level. This helps for groups that, or organizations that have multiple projects that span their application and want to get an overview of how their code coverage is improving across all their different projects. As a part of our true MVC iteration, we're going to be starting with just the ability to download the report for all of the projects within that group, but we'll soon add the ability to have the similar chart that you see at the project level, at the group level. That is the feature I'm most excited about coming in 13.3, but I also want to highlight a real cool theme that is emerging across 13.3 in our release, configure, and monitor stages. These stages are all about what happens with your application in production. Release is about getting it to production, configure is about how the infrastructure is prepared in your production environments, and monitor is about responding to the live health of your application in production environments. And as part of that, I want to go stage by stage through how we're improving real production quality support for your applications in larger organizations. The first step we're taking is this ability to read Vault directly from your CI variables. As part of your release process, there are probably core secrets in your deployment process that are stored in Vault, and this allows you to directly reference them in your GitLab CI YAML as part of your release or deployment definition, without having to have the kind of intermediaries that we've been supporting as a workaround to date. The next feature we'll be adding is group deploy keys. If you're familiar with deploy keys, they enable your deployment processes to have credentials to access the code in your repository. These deploy keys are managed at the project level. We're going to be adding support for doing that at the group level. Again, for use cases where you have multiple projects under one group that deploy to the same environment, you can store those centrally instead of having to replicate it across each and every project. We're also going to be adding initial support for what we call separation of duties. Many DevOps aficionados would tell you that we don't need to have separate permissions or roles between developers and operators, that we should be sharing those permissions. But lots of organizations on their way to migrate to DevOps need to continue to have support for operators not being able to touch code and developers not being able to touch production environments. This MVC that we'll be shipping in 13.3 is an initial step to allow for some explicit definition of those separations of duties. In the release stage, we're also going to be moving to group-based releases, which will allow you to have combined milestones across multiple projects under one release item, as well as triggering webhooks for new environments, which will allow you, when you're sharing an environment across multiple projects, to have one kind of singular release process or pipeline across all of those projects. We're also going to be adding enhanced support for the CI/CD dashboards. And those dashboards will give you an overview of how your release processes are going across your multiple projects. Another cool feature we're adding is a UI improvement to an existing feature in our progressive delivery group. Progressive delivery, again, allows you to more rapidly deploy to production in controlled ways. In this case, it's using feature flags, and we've recently added the ability to add strategies to your feature flag rollout. So you know what types of users or attributes of users you are rolling out to as part of that feature flag. We're now going to be displaying that directly in the view of the feature flag itself. So you can know if I check that box on the feature flag, how is that rollout going to happen and what's the strategy being used? In our configure stage, we have frequently encountered, let me just jump back, configure after release. In configure, we've frequently encountered concerns about using our existing Kubernetes management capabilities because they require both direct access to the Kubernetes cluster. So typically that means it can't be behind firewalls. And it means that you have to give cluster-wide credentials to GitLab in order for us to manage the cluster. As part of our 13.3 release, we're going to be rolling out what we've been working on in the last release, which is a Kubernetes agent. This agent we're going to be rolling out to GitLab.com and our Omnibus deployments. Enables you to do true GitOps style pull-based deployments to Kubernetes clusters without having to give up the security that you would want in a kind of more production and enterprise environment. We're also going to be adding a management interface for the Terraform state backend. So Terraform allows you to, by hosting your Terraform state within GitLab, you can manage the environment definition that Terraform is defining in that state file. We want to give you more capabilities to enable multiple state files per project, maybe define the environment scope per project, similar to what you can do in Kubernetes management, where you can attach a cluster to a project or a group. We want to give you the same capabilities with Terraform state files. Also in Terraform, in our Terraform improvements, our infrastructure as code has been generating these reports that show you, really useful reports that show you the effect of a merge request on your infrastructure definition right there in the merge request widget. We're going to be extending that support to allow for multiple different Terraform state files to report back. This would be the case if you had really clean separation between environments and applications in your Terraform definitions, and you wanted to have a single MR that might adjust many of them. In our monitor stage, we're adding not just the ability to support production environments, but how to get started quickly with using our monitoring tools. This is a really cool feature that allows you to define in a kind of WYSIWYG editor kind of way what you want your monitor dashboard panel to look like, and quickly see what data that would display right here in GitLab. So when you're creating new dashboards, there's not that kind of inner loop of waiting to see what the dashboard looks like. You can see it right here in the GitLab interface. We're also going to be adding, we recently added support for this dropdown here where you can filter an entire dashboard by a specific variable. In this case, we're using pod name to filter, and I've selected the ingress pod, and it gives me, a view of the network traffic, but I could use any other pod. This shipped in 13.2, or I will ship in 13.2 later this week. But what we're going to do is add that ability to use these variables. We're going to add it to our default dashboard, where today we show only pod averages. We're going to start showing not only the pod averages in your default dashboard when looking at a Kubernetes cluster, but also the ability to drill down into specific pods and see the metrics coming from those individual pods. Lastly, I mentioned our support for production environments. In the monitor stage, we're adding a lot of capabilities to allow you to manage the incidents and alerts right within your GitLab interface. First is an MVC for this incident list, where we'll have a brand new menu item for incidents right in the GitLab application, and show an overview of recently created incidents within GitLab, including important information like when it was created and who the assignee is and whether that's been published to your status page. We're also adding the ability to connect a runbook to an alert. So when an alert fires, you might have a defined process for how to respond to that alert. You can add that URL directly in the alert definition page, and then have that show up when the alert fires and creates an alert or incident for your team to respond to. Super helpful to get that mean time to resolution as short as possible, so you have all the information you need when responding to production incidents. Lastly, when you view your alerts themselves, you might be trying to decide and triage whether this alert should be an incident. And we're going to be adding the ability to see the log view that pertains to that specific alert right in the alert overview, so you can quickly make a decision about whether this warrants an incident or not. Those are the features that I'm really excited about. And again, with the theme of supporting production environments throughout the GitLab application, I'm really excited for 13.3. I'll hand it over to David to talk about secure.
Thank you, Kenny. Let me get my screen shared. Okay, updates for secure and defend. First with secure. we've been working off of two major themes for the first half of the year. First is offline environment support. We have a couple more updates related to that. Primarily, the team is working on number 2 of our goals, which are AST, or application security testing leadership. Kind of hop in with stack analysis first. Very much focused on the application security testing leadership. Focus on building out UI, so you don't have to just rely on the YAML, but actually being able to click through. But lots of other things are going on in the team as well. I highly recommend you check out Taylor's planning issue. You can see our priorities focused by category, as well as here you can see that same easy to use configuration. The other thing that the team is very much focused on is our open source stewardship, and we're beginning to move more of our scanners down to core. A couple of releases ago, we talked about Rails support. In this release, he has several scanners coming down to core. On the dynamic analysis side, dynamic analysis is very much focused on getting DAS to complete as part of our application security testing leadership. An example of that is giving you profiles that you can use as part of your scan. And so within the 13.3 release, you're going to be able to save site profiles and reuse them. And in here, you can give the name, define what the target is. If you want to run not a passive scan, but an actual security scan against it, you can validate your domain so we can use it, as well as all the other types of settings you would want as part of the site profile. And then you can save that in to your configuration. On the composition analysis team, they're again focused on those two major themes. For them, primarily on the offline support. Example of that in this release is bringing our PHP license compliance to make it available offline as well. I want to highly stress at this point that working offline environment is very important. We've had a lot of customers who have switched over to GitLab support because traditional security tools are requiring them to have that environment connected to the internet. And we want to be a partner with you as part of doing your security testing. Next, with regards to fuzzing, and yes, I want to say with a big smile that we have fuzz testing now. And I know that was something we didn't have a couple of releases ago. And so we have our initial release of our coverage guided fuzzer available. On here, I'm showing you both direction items, our deliverable items the team's committed to, as well as some stretch items, because we're ahead of schedule with our API fuzzing as well. And so we're looking at that as a stretch goal for August, with a commitment of getting it out in the September timeframe. With regards to coverage guided fuzzing, first, we want to be able to allow you to reuse corpus data. That corpus data is what the scanner learned about your environment to then trigger future scans to leverage that knowledge. And you can see that here in the example YAML file, where you can now point to the corpus you want to use. Next, with regards to the API fuzzing, we're looking at bringing support for API, OpenAPI v2 definition. So you can take that definition, give it to the scanner. The scanner is now going to know what to fuzz as part of your API, and we'll begin to test it for vulnerabilities. It'll be integrated just like the coverage guided fuzzer was first, not available in the dashboard or in the merge request view yet, but will be available within the pipeline view with the goal September, October, getting both of them available in the merge request view, within the dashboards and so forth. And then finally, on the secure side is our threat insights team. They were moved from defend over to secure because they're primarily focused on vulnerability management of secure findings. There's two really cool things that are coming out as well. I really like the first one here. Not that I say I don't like the second one, but this is allowing you to take already created issues and attach them to your vulnerability findings. So now you can begin to have that cause and effect, root cause analysis attached to the finding itself. Also, we generally don't talk about things that are just in design as part of a kickoff, but we're really excited to kick off the beginning of our security dashboard restructuring. It's going to allow us to provide you a lot more content. An example of this, this is the mockup the team's working off of. The security dashboard will now only include the widgets that are on the group dashboard today. So that current project status, as well as vulnerability trends over time. But this is enabling us to come in and now allow the scan teams to be able to create their widgets as well and have them added to the dashboard and give you a true dashboard experience for your security findings. The second part is that long list of vulnerabilities that were on the left-hand side will now be under vulnerability report. And you'll have that same ability to drill down into the results. What I personally really like about this though is because we have more room now, we can add in things like the identifier from the vulnerability, the scanner that found it, and so forth. So this is really taking the security findings and giving you actionable next steps So that way you can resolve and reduce your risk. I only scratched the surface. We have a lot of really great stuff going on. I highly recommend you check out the direction page. We recently updated it, as well as there's links to all the individual scanner direction pages. On the defense side, Defend is very much currently focused on container security. Sam has a really great priorities page. If you want to check it out, I highly recommend it. It can show you what we're working on across the themes, as well as the current status of those items. And to drill into this release, the one thing that is very interesting, we're beginning to add point-and-click GUI for the policies as well. We talked about this loosely when it first showed up in the UI, but now it's getting a lot more complex and a lot more feature-rich. So to kind of show you this is the common view you'd see for things like a Cisco firewall or a Palo Alto Networks firewall. We want you to be able to still type out configurations like you could in other products, but we also want to give you a nice point-and-click experience as well. And this is great for being able to think about your role set in English and the terminology in which you write a sentence. And you can see that here with, if network traffic is inbound to this container, I want to apply this policy. And that's very, very cool. And this is the thing that's going to continue to grow, not just for container network security, but for our container host security, which just recently launched. The Defend page has had a major overhaul to it. So if you've not looked at it recently, I highly recommend you check it out. It goes through all of our long-term themes, our current plans, as well as some status as to where we are in delivering to our goals. With that, I'm going to wrap up my section and hand it over to Josh to talk to you about enablement.
Awesome. Thanks, David. So like others, we have a lot of really exciting features coming in this release or planned for this release. And so please do check out the videos on our enablement section page, on the kickoff page. You can see those here. But I want to highlight primarily two items that come into two themes. One is improving the performance and scalability of GitLab, but also to help to ease the operational tasks of running a GitLab instance, as well as also supporting some new deployment targets as well. So let's jump into it. The first one is that we want to add support for dynamic resizing into GitLab itself. When we looked at the opportunities for improving the performance of GitLab, our front-end team quickly found out that for many pages that have a lot of, for example, avatars, this is the #1 thing that we can do to help improve the speed of our pages. This reduces the bandwidth that we send, but also the amount of CPU work that has to be done on the client side to resize all these images and do the layout changes. And so the opportunity here is tremendous to help our users have a faster experience when utilizing GitLab. Similarly, we're also going through and looking for cache SQL calls. The team found these, and in particular found that they were pretty impactful to overall performance. And we're recommending that we treat them similar to what's kind of called N+1 queries. The net here is that they consume memory and they slow down performance. To see some results of this, we actually have a work in progress branch right now, and we did some initial testing. And you can see here that for a particular call, the top offender, we were able to reduce the amount of memory allocated by half, and the overall time it takes to complete the operation was reduced by 75%. So again, some pretty nice improvements here. And this is just the one top offender. We'll go through and kind of work our way down the list as well over the next couple of releases, but some really nice work was done there. Similarly, on the search side of things, we're also looking to address slow search performance when using an advanced global search on large groups. And so as groups get larger, the time it takes to perform a search goes up kind of linearly. And so we're looking to solve that problem going forward to help make sure our search responsiveness is as fast as it possibly can be. Transitioning slightly over to partitioning, this can help performance, but also helps to increase our scalability of the GitLab platform as well. If you looked at our last milestone, we were working on implementing partitioning for our audit events table, and we're wrapping that up here. We'll should be rolling out, if not now, then shortly on gitlab.com, and we'll be moving on over to our events table. The events table essentially tracks all the activity by all users at GitLab. It powers your profile. And so there's a lot of content in there. We want to keep that content. We don't want to delete it. And so we want to go through and start to partition that content. On the database side, we also are working to add support for Postgres 12. Postgres 12, aside from being the next new release, also includes a number of performance enhancements. Last major release with PG11, we saw about an 8% performance increase across the board. But PG12 probably has similar, but also some really key improvements for partitioning. You can see here in this second quadrant blog post, the performance difference between PG11 and 12 for select performance. And it's pretty significant as the number of partitions grow. So with that, that's a kind of a focus on the performance side of things. Moving on to the operational and deployment targets, we want to go ahead and add support for official packages for ARM64. This is a platform that we see growing demand for, and we want to provide official, easy-to-use packages for it. And we're also looking to add support for Red Hat OpenShift by means of an official operator. Red Hat has been helping us here as well, so huge thanks out to the Red Hat team. And we're looking to have a proof of concept completed here for using our Helm charts as the basis or the kind of the underlying component for this operator. And we're so excited to start working on OpenShift support officially for GitLab. Finally, working on a couple other areas here away from the deployment targets, two items I wanted to call out. One is that we wanted to improve the relevance for Advanced Global Search as well. The team noticed that we were actually utilizing updated at as the only sort option. So we weren't actually using relevance as a sort order. So we're fixing that, and we'll be continuing to also add support for letting you choose what sorting option you want in the near future here. But relevance seemed like a better option than simply date when it was last utilized. And finally, we're also continuing to work on adding additional data types for geo. And so we're going through and adding support for package files. It just missed the 13.2 official release, and so that'll be in 13.3. And we'll be moving on over to also including snipper replication as we look to add support for all data types in geo, so that when you do fail over, when you have a geo node, your content is there and can be utilized. So with that, I think I'll hand it over to Eric to take us on to dev.
All right, thanks, Josh. I'm going to share my screen and we'll get going. So I'm going to talk about what the team's planned for 13.3 in the dev section. As a quick reminder, the dev section is the first 3 stages of the DevOps lifecycle. So that's manage, plan, and create. And I've grouped the issues that we've planned into kind of 3 big thematic buckets. The first of these is product team efficiency. So making product teams faster and more efficient inside of GitLab. In 13.2, we are releasing the ability to assign an issue to what we call an iteration. So this will essentially allow product teams to assign an issue to a longer running milestone, but then attach them to shorter running iteration sprints, if you will. So like a 1 or 2 week sprint, which will really help people follow whatever methodologies is used in their organization. And in 13.3, what we're going to be focused on is providing a little bit more analytics and insight into the iteration process. So this screen right here is really what we're going to be shipping in 13.3, the ability to see a burn down and burn up chart, as well as this issue and MR widget below, and the ability to group them by labels, assignee, or epics. So it's providing more visibility and usefulness into the iteration feature. The second thing we're going to launch is a new graph in our analytics area focused on throughput as measured by the number of merge requests that are merged in a given period of time. This is something that we at GitLab use to understand how efficient our engineering organization is being, and it's something that we use a third-party tool for data collection and visualization. But we think this should be front and center inside of GitLab so that our teams can take advantage of it, but also that your teams can take advantage of it as well. So looking forward to what we're going to call merge request analytics. We've made a bunch of great improvements to our design management features over the past few releases, but the one thing you still can't do is reorder your designs. They always show up in the date that they were uploaded. And what this can kind of lead to is a problem like this, where you want to click through maybe 4 screens, but they're out of order because the flow isn't there, and because you uploaded them in an order that didn't really make sense. And so we're going to allow the ability for you to reorder these so that when you click through, you can easily show a flow or a specific path through UI. And so that should be a really nice improvement to our design management features. We're also going to support selecting a code owner section to be a required approval rule. Currently, you can do this for a user or a group. And over the past few releases, we added code owner sections. And so now you can select the code owner section to be a required MR approval rule, which will really help streamline that process of defining a code owner, as well as then linking that code ownership to an MR approval rule. In 13.2, we are releasing the ability to validate your GitLab ci.yaml files in the web IDE. And we're using this via a third-party schema site, but we want to extend this functionality by supporting custom JSON schema validation inside the web IDE. And so this is important for projects that rely on people writing configs in either JSON or YAML. If you've written in those formats, you know that a spacing issue or a typo can really hamper your output. And so we want to allow the ability to essentially define a JSON schema and then allow you to validate whatever you're writing against that schema right in the Web IDE, making that process a little bit more streamlined. And as an example, how we're going to use this at GitLab is the release post. So we're going to upload a release post schema. We have a release post that's delivered every single month where about 50 product team members collaborate on that post. And this will really help to kind of check the spacing and the wording and making sure that all the blocks are properly formatted. And then lastly, for product team efficiency, we focus a lot on devs and product managers, but one team that is really important in the product creation process is the quality team. And we've been talking about quality management inside of GitLab for a long time. I'm really excited that we're finally scheduling our minimal viable change for quality management in 13.3. What this will look like is essentially a programmatic way to create epics and issues and link those to what we call test sessions, test suites, and tests. So it's going to be a pretty simple MVC, but we're going to obviously utilize this as the foundation to make a more robust quality management framework inside of GitLab. So I'm really excited for that. Our second theme is access and compliance. And this will probably be a theme for the rest of the year. So it's very, very important to us. The first issue I want to highlight is setting a default role for SSO in GitLab.com. Currently, if you SSO into GitLab.com at a top level group, you are created as a guest, which in some cases is too permissive and in some cases is not permissive enough. And so we want to provide the ability to allow for a default role to be set whenever someone SSOs in, so that they can be made a different role or they can be given no access at all. We should really help with managing those groups on GitLab.com and for users SSOing in. We're also going to allow an option to federate your Atlassian and Jira account into GitLab. So this is useful for two reasons. The first is if you're using your Atlassian account for your source of truth, you'll now be able to use GitLab powered by that account. The second reason is we've been focusing on a bit deeper integration with Atlassian's Jira. And this will allow us to deepen that integration by allowing you to take several actions against Jira issues right inside of GitLab and then be linked, have those actions linked back to your Jira user account as well. So that should be really, really useful and excited to see that work land. We're also going to make some improvements to personal access tokens. We're going to allow admins the ability to revoke those tokens via an API. And then we're also going to provide an additional warning if those personal access tokens have expired. We already do provide a notification that your token will expire within 7 days, but then there's no further notification job. And so we're going to provide an additional email that says, hey, your token has expired. You may want to create a new one or check it out in the personal access token section. We're going to continue iterating on our group compliance dashboard feature by adding the source and destination branch data to that dashboard. This will help you quickly understand if something kind of went out of order in your deployment or merge process. Really focusing that change management workflow to make sure that branches were merged to the right branch in the right place and in the right order. And so a nice iteration here to our group compliance dashboard. And then lastly, on compliance, we're going to ship our minimal viable change for chain of custody reporting. And this will simply look like an export job in the compliance dashboard. Next to each project, there will be a button that will provide a CSV of all commits. The table will look directionally like this. I don't know if it'll look exactly like this upon CSV export, but it'll essentially show the author, the merge request, the commit SHA, as well as some other information, which will be really helpful to just hand to an auditor to prove that code was only touched by certain people and via whatever compliance regimen that organization was held to. So really excited for these great improvements here. And then lastly, we are going to focus on just better GitLab management in general. And the first way we're going to do this is just by providing some better mechanisms and hooks to clean up your repository. So whenever you run the git gc command, we want to prune all loose objects immediately in the repo. And we also want to do the same thing for unreferenced LFS objects. So this should help keep your repository size manageable and make sure that those objects that aren't being referenced anymore aren't in that repository anymore. And then similarly, When you do that, we want to update those repository stats immediately so that you can see exactly how much storage your repository is taking up. I mentioned this last time, but it's important enough to highlight again. We're going to continue adding concurrency support for Git repository backups. Right now, this is a serialized process. We want to obviously make this parallel so that more threads can run in parallel, which will basically make that backup time a lot quicker. And then, as always, we're continuing our work on improving Gitly cluster. Gitly cluster is our highly available Gitly architecture. And what we're going to do in this release is start to use a quorum-based voting strategy. What does this mean? Well, what it means is in order for us to enable strong consistency, we're requiring all nodes to agree that a write happened. But if a node goes down, then that node can never agree, which will basically lead to your Gitly cluster being offline and unavailable, introducing another single point of failure, which the entire point of Gitly cluster was to get away from in the first place. So we're going to start using a quorum-based voting strategy so that if a single node goes down, a quorum can still be maintained and that the write can be accepted. As always, this is just a small section of the amazing features that the dev section is going to deliver in 13.3. And as always, go to the kickoff page to see the rest of the items. Anoop, back over to you.
Thank you, Eric. Wow, that is amazing. There's so much cool stuff coming out in 13.3. I cannot wait. As a quick reminder, 13.2 will be out in just a couple of days. So please definitely check it out. And with that, see you next month. Bye.